Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics on Random. Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Today, I got to sleep in a little bit later because it's Juneteenth, and I played a tape show at KPFT. And guess what? I won't forget the name, Powder Springs, Georgia, because our one and only Paul Fleming is from Powder Spring, Georgia, and he was one of the first in the house. As well, we have Eric Hayes in the house. Lizard from Atascocita, Kingwood. Lizard Queen is in the house from Houston. Paul Fleming again from Powder Springs. We also have Melanie Keelan from Barcelona, Spain. We also have Yvette Avery Herod from Atlanta, Georgia. And we have, where is AVQ? He is in the house from Brooklyn, New York. And of course, E2247 from God knows where, from everywhere he is from. And Bridge MCP says, Egberto saw the post of me speaking. I hate my voice. Unfortunately, we love your voice. We love your voice. AVQ asserts himself. He says, always at the top of the chat. That's where I'm at. And I found you. Anyway, Bridge, not only is there a video about you, I hope you realize that, girl, because you know what? You were a star this morning. You know, it looked like the women that we have star a lot on the radio, both on air and off air, because Bridge MCP was on KPFT 90.1 FM this morning because she was on the tape show. That's the link to the entire blog post about the interview that she did with me yesterday. I hope you take a look at it. I hope you read it. Bridge MCP and all others, share it to all your families and friends, because that was a stellar, I think, with the right level of emotions, etc. on that program. Anyway, let's get started. Not a lot to start with today. I see you guys just kind of introduced yourself. Of course, Eric Hayes says, finally, smart energy plan used nuclear for energy, not weapons. The Senate on Tuesday passed a bill to accelerate the deployment of nuclear energy capacity, including by speeding, permitting, and creating new incentives for advanced nuclear reactor technologies. Expanding nuclear power has broad-based support with Democrats as a critical decarbonizing the power sector to climate change. Yeah, but if we're going to decarbonize, we better make sure that we know what we're doing. I am not sold. I mean, look, I understand that all there is to do about nuclear power. You know, I wrote a paper on nuclear power when I think I was actually a sophomore in college, when I was 100% for nuclear power then. Of course, I watched, remember that meltdown in 3 Mile Island that came right after that program, that movie that I can't remember the name of the movie with the meltdown. It's amazing how similar they were. You know, there's a lot to do before we start to centralize on something like nuclear power. We should be working on back-end stores. We should be working on how to store the enormous amount of green energy that's out there to be used, but not that we are not currently set up to store. You know, there's a lot of ways to store green energy, both in canals, meaning in elevation. There are a lot of different ways you can store energy that we're not talking about that doesn't require us to go ahead and go nuclear. But that's for another day. Eric Hayes also says a major fundraiser for former President Barack Obama says that she is now supporting former Donald Trump because President Joe Biden has been an unmitigated disaster for the United States. Evidently, she's not a very smart woman. If she came to the conclusion that the things that Biden did, and again, we can enumerate these items one at a time. It is easy to say Biden was a lousy president. We had high inflation. That statement on its own shows a disregard for thinking, a disregard for critical thinking. And one of the things that you find with people who just say Biden has been a disaster is that they don't know how to itemize item for item, both the things that Obama did, the things that Trump did, the things that Biden did. You know, it's easy to just say bad president, what is hard is critical thinking. And I won't even read any more of what she has to say, anything like that, because critical thinking would not create a plausible comparison between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. You cannot critically think and believe that the policies of that somehow Trump would institute could possibly be better than the things done by Joe Biden. But again, I can't help those who refuse to think critically. Let's see. What else have we got here? Micah, Meltdown. Yeah, movie about it was China Syndrome. Man, you got a good idea. Let's see what else we got here. Paul Fleming says Juneteenth marks the day the Union Army marched into Galveston to free Black Americans from the chains of slavery, and today the fight for liberty and justice is ongoing. Our work continues until we achieve these shared values for all. Agreed. And that's why I'm doing I am playing the interview that I did with the Conscious Mindset today. Lee Grant says hi all, and to which I say hello. Lee Grant, how are you doing? Michael Rudden says skeptical science. The myth that renewable energy sources can meet base load 24 hour per day demand has become quite widespread and widely accepted. After all, the wind doesn't blow all the time, and there's no sunlight at night. However, detailed computer simulation backed up by real-world experience with wind power demonstrate that transition to 100% energy production from renewable sources is possible within the next few decades. I mean, look, let me show you why we have problems. It's because of our inability to think outside of the box. It's because what the plutocracy has taught us to learn is stupidity. And I'll give you the one great one. Eric Hayes says, quit poo-poo ideas. Quit poo-poo ideas, right? What I mentioned was science. Poo-poo ideas is thinking that you can actually solve a problem, let's say at the current state of nuclear energy. Look, there is a nuclear energy that has potential, right? It's called nuclear fusion. And why does nuclear fusion have potential? Because its byproduct is not yet something that we have to create a solution for. As an example, any reactor that we built, and this is science now. So Eric refused to think about science, but this is science here. Fission reactors have a byproduct that lasts hundreds of thousands of years. They have a half-life of several thousand years. Fission reactors, which is what we have in Baytown and in California and all over the country, we have fission reactors. Those reactors have their nuclear fuel just stored on site. Every time they try to get it to some mountain in Colorado or somewhere else, nobody wants it in their backyard. And you know why they don't want it in your backyard? If you get the byproducts of fission that seeps into your water supply, and by the way, your water supply isn't something that's discontinuous. If you pollute the water supply with fission, with plutonium in let's say the Barker Reservoir, you are polluting a whole lot of drinking water and farming water for a lot of people. So unless you are going to tell me that you have a several 100,000-year mitigation for fission reactions, then talking about a fission nuclear reactor without knowing what your grandchildren are going to have to do with the output from that makes no sense. Now, the capitalists, they're going to say, yeah, let's go ahead and build fission reactors, because they understand that the people who are going to pay the price of the waste from these reactors, they'll be dead by then. So I am not against nuclear for the sake of being nuclear. I'm against nuclear whenever you don't have a solution for the waste. That is science. Brother Rudnin just gave a good link. I haven't read the link, but I know I know the actions behind it. There is there is enough solar output, wind output to generate electricity 24/7 based on our needs. That's not a question. That's just science and math. Now, what the plutocracy does, what the oil companies do, what all the companies that have interest in energy do, is they look at they try to get you from thinking critically, and they try to get you to think emotionally. I want my big Gustler. My electric saw is not as powerful as my gasoline saw. Okay, let's look at the science. The density of energy that's in a gallon of gas is higher than in how much we can actually store in that same volume of some sort of a battery store. But we're improving on that as time goes on. But the fact is, yeah, it is true. The energy density of oil is high. And by the way, what is oil? Oil is solar energy, right? Oh my God, critical thinking. Oil is solar energy because it was the carbon that got into organic material that came from the air, right? That was gotten through photosynthesis. And then after these things died, concentrated themselves in the ground. Oil is solar energy, but it is concentrated solar energy that would bring us back, if all is burned, to our primordial state, a state where we didn't exist. Right? Critical thinking. Critical thinking. Remember, our plutocracy teaches us how to be dumb. And when you say something like poo-poo science or whatever, with all due respect, that is dumb. What Michael Rudnin talked about, being able to fulfill our necessities all over in Scandinavian countries right now, they're studying other than using back-in stores for storing, let's give some examples here, some factual examples. We can run windmills at full blast. Right now, here's what we do. What we do is we keep gas-powered energy available because it's easy to start gas and turn off a turbine. You can get a gas-powered plant online rather quickly, in minutes, right? Because again, you just turn on the turbine like a jet turbine. It runs the stuff. It gets the stuff going. A coal burning plant is different. A coal burning plant has to be primed because you have to get the coal burning, heat up the water. The water turns into steam. It takes quite a few hours to get a coal burning plant going. When they talk about the natural gas being the backup, that is what we have. But now, so the best solution right now is to have a back-end store for wind energy and solar energy. And how is that done? There are several things that's been contemplated. One, create man-made lakes. A man-made lake is the perfect back-end store for both solar energy and wind energy. How? You pump water into the lake while you have excess energy. And when there is no energy coming from wind or solar, that water comes down through a turbine and you get the same amount of electricity minus the overrun. Number two, you can use batteries using lithium and other newly developed techniques to store it chemically. When you put electricity into a battery, lithium or otherwise, that's a chemical conversion of electricity. You move around the ions and it's stored. And when you need it, you reverse the process. So you can use water as a store. You can also use chemical energy as the store for later. And in other countries in the world, what they've been trying is using very, very heavy, heavy. Actually, Lee Grant, it's not expensive at all to build lakes. And in fact, because these lakes can be used for multi-purposes, what you do is, let me give you the scenario here. The scenario here is you create these lakes that are fairly shallow but wide, some fairly deep and high, but a lot of them shallow, so that you can have it used for recreation as well. And you can actually earn from the industries that get themselves built around these lakes. And at the same time, the lake is used for, let's use a big example. A big example is there are some lakes that need refilling right now. They call the Lake Mead. We could actually say, you know what? We will send power lines to pumps at Lake Mead and pump water into Lake Mead. And then we get the Hoover Dam giving the excess electricity. There are all these techniques that could be done, but it's not what capitalism wants. But it would work if it's subsidized, if we, the people, build it, and we will get ahead. So look, there are answers in some Scandinavian countries right now. What they're doing is they're creating these big towers. And by the way, F is equal to MA. That's the formula for force into MA. So 1/2 mg squared is how you calculate the amount of energy in a body that's fallen, right? So if you go ahead and use excess energy to create the potential of a huge mass going up either in the air or down in the ground, and when you need the electricity, that mass slowly comes down. When it's coming down, the energy created is 1/2 mg squared. When you go up, is 1/2. What is it? Is mgh, the calculation for how much energy is actually stored. But all of this is math and science, and it's available to us if we choose to do it. But the business people, the capitalists who are dumb, Elon Musk, all of these guys, they don't know science. They just know capitalism. They don't understand these things. But it is there for us to use if we choose to do so. Michael Rudden says, Egberto, we have a choice to make. Can we get off coal now or have a nature crush our civilization and get off coal then? Our civilization can only exist so long as nature remains stable, and our civilization's carbon output is pushing us out of stability. And that is an absolutely true statement. And, you know, we are going to leave carbon one way or the other. You know, when carbon got formed and stored in the ground is what gave us life. We created a stable enough atmosphere such that we can exist as we exist today. Again, but anyhow, I got to go start my video because it's a fairly long video. It's an interview on my new book. So we can continue the discussion for those of you who want to continue in the chat. But look, folks, let's get intelligent. Let's get smart. Let's stop allowing the corporatocracy to make us dumb. It's on us. It's not on them. It's on us whether we choose to be dumb or not. But here we go.
Before we get into the tribulations of the Afro-Latino Caribbean Man, and that's a great title. That's a great title. I love the subheader as well. You talk about how important this work is, and how meaningful the work is, and how significant it is. And I'm just wondering, as you've spent these 16 hours, as you've made countless sacrifices. You got me stumbling, bumbling, and hiccuping because I'm just taking in the gravity of the work that you're doing and have done. I sit back and ask this question, maybe as others are thinking it themselves. Where do you find the time, the strength, the focus? Because so much of what you do is, a labor of love. And is a very challenging and arduous and difficult task to complete. And as we'll get into the book and other things, people will see that you have an indomitable spirit But I'm just wondering, as a mere mortal miscreant, how in the world do you find the strength and the fortitude and the veracity, sagacity to do what you do so brilliantly?
My brother, let me tell you, first of all, I think it starts with one, I want to do good, and two, I love what I do. I mean, in doing, when you love something that you're doing, it's not as taxing. It's more taxing on the family than it is on me, in that there are a lot of things that we can't do because of the change in profession that I've made, etc., that we could do before, well, we can't do anymore. But that said, how do I find the time? Well, the truth is that I don't have, how should I say this? I don't have much of a life in the last few years other than this, right? And the thing, and like I said, it's a good thing that I like what I'm doing. I've had a great life my high school days, my college days, being an activist in college, and when I worked the 5 years I worked for corporate America, and when I worked doing my software engineering, I loved each facet of my life. I loved, right? And what I'm doing now, I love as well. Now, I wish I had a bit more time, but that requires me to get a little bit more funding that I don't have. In this space, it's very, very hard to get funding, right? So it turns out that a lot of things that I could otherwise have offloaded to others, well, I end up doing it myself. And there's just a finite amount of time in the day, as you well know.
Yes, absolutely. But you find ways to not only add value to the time, but make us aware of really what time it is. As we talked off air, you talked about the critical nature of now and what's going on and what's happening. And I think your book, while it is, a look into many of the historical dynamics of your existence and how you relate and correlate in society, I also thought it was a wonderful microcosm, if you will, of what we're experiencing in our society at large. So many people are trying to find a new way, a new space, and create a new aspect of how they are looked at and looked upon and treated. We are in Pride Month, and many people are expanding their understanding and their awareness and their appreciation of others that were typically subjugated to, the rungs of subculture, deviant culture, things of that nature. And, they had to go through that ostracization. So we're seeing a transformation, if you will, of people beginning to assert their greater rights and their greater understandings of those rights being enacted and expressed. And I'm just wondering, as you wrote this book and as the work that you're doing is, bringing a new frontier, if you will, or blazing a trail and trailblazing at the same time, I'm wondering, what insights have you gained? And then also what wisdom can you share with us for us to better understand what's really going on?
I'm going to give one word, first of all, and that is not being afraid of being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And if you're not afraid of being vulnerable, that opens you up to learning a hell of a lot. And I can tell you that I have this phrase that I use that I say, I can learn from a 5-year-old or I can learn from an 80-year-old. It doesn't really matter. I try whenever I have communications with anybody, whenever I have communications with you, whenever I have I make sure that I try to learn something. And somebody can always ask me, okay, you always say that you can learn from everybody. What did you learn from that person or that kid? And they would be astounded that I actually generally have an answer at the tip of my tongue that I'd said, oh, I got an insight into this, or I learned this, or whether it's active or passive, there's something that I try to get out of that communication. And I tell you what, I think it is having that door a bit open. I don't know if in the book where I talk about being on the flight to China, where I made that change, that change the way that I was.
Oh,
I actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, opening your mind up to learn is the most important thing, and not being scared to be wrong. You know, I don't have a problem being wrong, and I don't have a problem somebody correcting me, because I know the next time I'll get it right. And I can actually be a conduit for that person who actually corrected me. I tell that to women all the time. In my sexist days, right? They were sexist, and there was a time when women would just let things pass by, and they know better than you do, and they just let it pass by. Well, women, I love the millennial and the Gen Z generation right now, because they don't let anything pass by. And in several of the organizations that I've been a part of, these women made me know that rather quickly. And it was a learning experience, and a well-deserved learning experience.
Wow. Well said. And I think on this learning experience and this journey that you've been on, and I'm ascertaining this and hopefully ascribing this right to you based on what I read in the book, is, your willingness to stand up for those who are sometimes downtrodden and discriminated upon. And even when you face the brutal force that comes with discrimination and, disrespect and, stereotypes, because I can fondly recall when I read in the book how one of your professors, and I use that term loosely because I don't know if a professor should operate this way, tried to castigate you and reproof you and, make you feel less than, if you will, which you did not allow about a word. And then, in your great understanding and courage, you ask your fellow colleagues and students in the class if they knew what the word was, and they didn't know. So then you gave the professor a lesson on how to better understand his or her students, and then to teach what that word meant so that everyone could gain the understanding. Now, I bring that up and I want people to read it in the book because I think it's beautiful how you did that. You didn't take it personal, but you used your personage to help the public good, if you will. Those in the course and the Commonwealth benefited from you turning ignorance into enlightenment and greater intelligence for the whole. And I'm speaking that because I think that that's a beautiful template for what we all must learn. Because in this time, in this age of cantankerism and contention and derision and divisiveness, you found a way to take something that was ugly and turn it into a beautiful, teachable moment. So I'd love for you to enlighten us on how you were able to turn dark, bleak moment into a moment of brilliance.
The one thing that professor did is made sure that I would never forget the word interstitial. Okay.
That's right.
I would never, ever forget that word interstitial, because when I raised my hand and I said, what is interstitial? And he embarrassed me in front of the class. You don't know what it is. And then the class started to laugh. And I turned around and I asked each one of them, what is it? No one could answer. And then the professor finally realized that, well, just maybe, But the thing about it is this, I said, I grew up, I went to the University of Texas in the 80s. The University of Texas had been integrated for some time before that, but it was in the 80s. And there is still that thing where, folks that are in engineering that have my pigmentation, they think that I'm there for a numerical reason and not for the intellect. So these teachers took a whole lot of liberties in the way they talked to you or thought about you. And what I remember is this. My parents, I had great parents, and these guys taught me that I was no better than anybody else. But by the same token, nobody else was better than I am. So even as I felt that sting at UT academically, it never fazed me that somehow those other kids even though most of them were more wealthy than I was, because I wasn't, right? That somehow they were better. So it gave me that extra liberty, if you will, or freedom to challenge these professors. What are they going to do to me? I mean, I never ever, like I said, I've always been nice, but at that time I did have a chip on my shoulder, one that I've pretty much lost now. And growing, as you grow, you learn how sometimes a chip on the shoulder may be good for you, but it may not be good for the process. So you learn how to modify your behavior as you get older, right? But then I would take nothing. I'm telling you, you touch me and it will be hell. In corporate America, it was the same. But as I grew older, you learn how to do things a bit more efficiently, better,
Yeah, definitely. Without losing integrity.
Right.
I think that's very important. You understood the significance of keeping your constitution that's true to yourself.
Right.
I'm wondering this, being a Black Panamanian,
right.
Someone who is well aware of your cultural background and distinctly keen on how valuable and important that is. Can you give us, from your perspective, some insights on those who come to this country? Because many times, we see these reels, or we see these conversations that people have. And, even today, discussions about the border and immigrants and these terms that are being thrown out that I won't use today to disparage those, seeking for a better life, if you will. And then the discussions around that. So much of it is polarized. So much of it is politicized. And I'd like someone who can talk about all of those things, but first deal with the personage coming to a new country, coming to a new experience, coming from a place that may be vastly different than the place that you are here now. What is that like? And what were you able to find out about yourself that gave you the wherewithal to be here right now?
I get it. I tell you what, first of all, I tell something to everybody, whether they be a Black Panamanian or any immigrant that's coming over here. And for that matter, every Black person that previous to, I don't remember which amendment it is, 14th or 13th, wasn't even considered a citizen, right? I always preface it to say, do not let anybody take away your right to be here or your ownership of being here. And what I mean by that is the only reverence that I have to any person here are to the natives who beat us all here. So therefore, I will not allow myself to feel inferior or to let those who think they're more American than I am to really feel they're more American than I am, or anything of that nature. Said, you are just as an American as I am, just as that other immigrant that went through the process to naturalize. And to put it bluntly, at least those of us that are coming over here are not coming over here to conquer, pilfer, or do anything to these folks. Most of us are coming over here for a job, coming over here to get an education. And for those who said, well, you're coming to my country to get that, I remind folks that as Americans, and the tentacles of America goes throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, and a lot of what's made here comes from there. And thus, those who are able to migrate here should feel that that they're doing nothing more than the standard migration that we do, and that America's businessmen and otherwise and others have done. That said, I want to say there's a story that I alluded to in the book, and that had to do with when I just got here, Brenham, Texas. And this is going to sound a bit funny, but when I came here, there was sort of a separation between those with melanin like myself and those with melanin that were born here. In other words, Black Americans, African Americans versus Latino Americans, right? And I didn't let that thing suffice. But when I came here, we are young and you're looking for ladies and all of that. And I saw these beautiful sisters out there and I wanted to make a play. And I was a bit too weird for them. And the ones who really were interested in this strange speaking kind of guy at that time were the white girls. So those are the ones who I mostly dealt with back, at Blinn, in Country Town, Blinn, as well as, of course, some of my Latinas, but we were kind of too close in culture and everybody wanted to try new things. When you come from Latin America and you come over here, that sort of thing. But I kind of got tired of, there are two things that were happening as a Black guy from Panama when I came over here. The older white, there's a woman that treated me like her son. She was a white woman that ran the cafeteria, and she tried to steer me away from Black Americans. And I am, first of all, it never worked in that. I still tried to find a way to get engaged, but she tried to stop that, right? And I didn't understand what the dynamics was that was happening in this country. And for a long time, people didn't, or a lot of folks don't get it. If you can create a separation between, let's say, the Latin Black folks and the born American Black folks, you actually create a system where you still maintain control. Believe it or not, both. So I never forgot, I wasn't quite able to articulate those things back then because again, you're young, you're 19 years old or so. But I remember it started when I went to the University of Texas. And, I went to the University of Texas and the first thing I saw was the Afro-American Culture Committee. And I wanted to be a part of it. So I jumped into the school and I went up there and I got in and, even though I was kind of spoken to with a little bit of suspicion, because again, that accent and that sort of stuff. And I don't know if you know, but at UT, like Nigerians and all of that was isolate themselves or whatever. But I always believe in that kind of inclusive thing, right? So I remember going to one of these meetings and the folks telling me, we're listening to Martin Luther King. Those things used to come on long plays, LPs, and we put on the LP and we're listening to Martin Luther King's speech. And when we got into talking, I said, yeah, I like Martin Luther King, but I'm really, I really have an affinity for Malcolm X. And they didn't like that I said that. And they exploded on me and they started calling me, you're not one of us anyway. You're a damn import and all these kinds of things they're telling me, right? So I finally got fed up and I said, let me tell you guys something, okay? No Black person in this hemisphere came on a pleasure ship, right? It's just a matter of where the ship stopped, how we speak. So I speak Spanish and I speak English with a Caribbean twang. You know why? Because the ship stopped in Jamaica and Barbados and those places where my forefathers are from, and in Panama, where my people are now. That's the only difference. But the truth of the matter is we're the same. So don't call me an import or try to use we're Americans on me, because you and I have quite a bit in common, more so than you're likely to realize. And it was that kind of a fight that I had at UT in the beginning. These kids that came up from, I guess, I don't know what many of them thought, but I sort of constantly forced myself into not allowing, first of all, that separation, because I wasn't going to deal with that. And it worked. And then eventually I formed something called the Caribbean Central American Association. I don't know why I call it that, because there were more South Americans in there than I call it Caribbean Central American because I was from Central America, but there are more South Americans in there than anything else, right? So, but that started me to learn a lot of the false racial dynamics that occur in this country. First of all, there really ain't no race, but since we play the racialized game in America, it taught me that everybody plays the racialized game, whether you're black, white, Latino, or Latino, not a race, but you get what I'm saying. But all these things. And navigating that is something that I had to do, as you see in my book, both in school, in corporate America, and as I formed my own company and work. And to put it bluntly, even where you think it shouldn't happen in liberal spaces, and I'll just say it, at KPFT, at Daily Kos, at everywhere else, you find that there's a dynamic, this kind of dynamic that you have to go through.
And you've went through it quite well. As I've witnessed your intelligence, your savvy and integrity, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, has been something that is quite immaculate and unparalleled. And I think that's why you make such a wonderful spokesperson or a beautiful example of what we can all become and strive to do in whatever fashion, whatever facet possible. And the reason why I say that is because you are a uniter. You do work across cultural and ethnic and racial lines to find the commonality, to find the good, to increase and improve the wherewithal and the commonwealth of the collective. And I think now more than ever, we need those kinds of individuals and that kind of understanding to become a part of the consensus of our society. So I'm wondering, and as you mentioned, understanding some of the racial intricacies of this society, what have you gleaned in terms of the underbelly and the underworkings that, as you mentioned, are on pretty much every sphere and aspect of our society? And then how have you not become a victim of those things, if you haven't, but you've used those things in a way in which has caused you to be such a well-respected and well-renowned vocal proponent of the betterment of our society?
Let me say this. I think one of the things that I realized ultimately is that racism, sexism, homophobia, all the isms is a requirement for the type of economic system that we have. All those things are necessary. And what I mean by that is we have all been looking at the wrong boogie person, right? If I can keep myself and everybody else fighting among groups and, first of all, let me first say, I 100% believe in identity politics. Until all identities have equal access to success, you have to have identity politics because each identity have different issues that need to be solved to make them an equal, have equity within our system. Now, that said, there is one specific culprit. And if you go through, if for all the racial things that I've gone through in my book, right, there's one culprit that is the master of it all. And that is our economic system and those who run our economic system, because they depend on us not seeing how flawed it is. And how do we not see how flawed it is if not to be worried about conflicts among each other? So therefore, if I can deconflict problems between black folk and white folk and folks from another part of the world and immigrant, if I can find a way to show the common thread that create dissension among these people, then at that point we can actually hit this plutocracy, this oligarchy, that is causing the problems. But we have some limited time here before structures are changed to be able to do this in a peaceful manner. And so, I mean, when you look at where we are today, you asked me this earlier about what's happening today. All of this ties together. You know, none of this stuff is separate. My book, which is about the tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean man, the only reasons we have those tribulations, myself, you said, you have gone through, you could pick that book up. And like I said, that book was written for two groups, the aggrieved and those who are not aggrieved. And notice I didn't say not aggrieved in the manner in which we are, because we're all aggrieved by the system. But some of us are on the lower end of the totem pole. In other words, we are more aggrieved than others. And this book, the person who is more aggrieved is going to pick that book up and say, as a Black person, as a Latino person, they're going to say, oh man, I get it. I get it. And for my white brothers and sisters, they're going to look at it and say, oh my God, I didn't know, but I see it now. I didn't know. Then, of course, you have those who are going to say, you're looking at it the wrong way. That wasn't really why you had those issues. But when you add those people who've lived it and those who are sufficiently empathetic with it, that's a majority.
Wow. I have to ask this question because it was something that, just came to me as I was reading through your work. It seems as if this book is still a work in progress, if you will.
Absolutely.
And you don't try to come across as if you have the panacea to ameliorate all of these issues.
No.
But it is very insightful. And I think people would benefit from hearing, reading, and learning from your experience and how that experience has helped shape your work, even as we speak. And as we speak, I know that it's important for people to have these conversations because many times we want to sweep it under the rug and act as if, we can just be ostriches and put our head in the sand and just focus on, who's winning the finals, if you will, or, whatever sporting event is taking our attention. But you make it very clear in your writing that we need to address these issues. And whether we're in the corporate environment, whether we're in the universities and colleges, whether we're in the community working with grassroots organizations, we need to have equity and equality. And then also the opportunity, as you mentioned, for identities to be respected. Why is that so important? And how is that juxtaposition against what some would call a return to making America great, which some would say is a euphemism for a more intolerant and a more disrespectful and class stratified society, class and race. Let me make sure I said that.
I mean, no, you're absolutely. I mean, I think you nailed it with that question, right? Make America Great makes no sense for anybody that's Black, anybody that's Latino, any woman at all. Make America Great. In the past, women couldn't vote. In the past, Black folks, even though Black men had the vote, they really didn't. Latinos, Chinese. I mean, you look at every other demographic, America has been becoming a better nation. But if you take a look at the Constitution or the founding fathers and all of this, right? To some, it's blasphemy. When you talk, if you speak ill will about the people who founded the country, if you speak ill will about some of the people we revere, one of the reasons they're wanting to ban books that say certain things right now is that no longer are we just going to buy the facade of the genesis of this country. Look, America is a great country, not because of its founders, not because of how it started. America is a great country because of the people within America and the changes that were allowed to be made. I cannot call somebody ultimately great who considered me 3/5 of a person, no matter what time, what period of time they were in. I cannot call somebody great who said women couldn't vote. I cannot call somebody great who supported the Trail of Tears. I cannot call somebody great who constantly signed contracts over and over with indigenous folks, and when they find gold or resources on the land, went ahead and denied said contracts. Those are realities. And when you ask everybody to look back in time as that being a great time, or that being a time of a moral time, no, these were very immoral times. And unless we are honest about this, people simply, when you live your life on a lie, when you live your life on hypocrisy, right? That is what you get out of it. And that's why you could get the growth of Donald Trump. When Donald Trump came in and said, we're no longer going to talk about DEI. We're not going to talk about the 1619 project. Instead, we're going to talk about the 1776 project. In other words, let's take away a truth and fill it in with a lie. I mean, these are the things that we have to be cognizant of. And you know what? This isn't a black thing, a white thing, or any other thing. This is just a truth thing. And just like black folks have been harmed by this country, believe it or not, my brothers and sisters in Appalachia right now are a victim of the same thing that I have, even as it isn't as profound in certain aspects. But they're living in a society where 50% of them are on some side of assistance. But you don't hear about those kinds of things because it doesn't fit a profile that keeps us in our places.
Keeping us in our place. That's a very interesting statement that I think your book expands upon. Not only the importance of not allowing people to put you in boxes, but also not allowing yourself to accept boxes and limitations upon your thinking. I think that this is a must read. People have to absorb this information that's in this wonderful book. Brother, I didn't know you had scoliosis. I knew you were a bad man, but I didn't know you had the bionic man. You're a bad man, my brother. You know what I'm saying? So I big salute you and I thank you. And
we spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that interview. That was a long interview, and it was a lot longer, actually. I had to cut some pieces out. Actually, it went on to a whole lot of stuff. Breach says, when you get the choice to check a box and race, always check other, then write in human race. I love that, Breach. Let me start doing that. Anyway, thank you for liking that interview, Brother Paul Fleming. Look, folks, you can get the book by going to politicsdoneright.com/books, politicsdoneright.com/books. I guarantee you, whether you're black, white, Latino, Caribbean, Chinese, Asian, whatever you are, there's a lot to get out of the book based on these experiences that I've had. And I guarantee you, there's going to be a lot to talk about it, not only among yourselves, but among people of different ethnicities, etc. When you say, well, I never thought about this, I never thought about that. Anyway, please support the program however you can. E2247 says, this was a fine interview. Egberto, thank you. Actually, we got to thank Sedrick Keeler, who was the interviewee from Conscious Mindset. I love him. He, interestingly, he's married to a Panamanian woman. Benit says, great interview. Thank you all for the show. Must give water to birds. 102 still here. Girl, go take care of those birds. Anyway, folks, you can find out how to support the program. You can support the program. All the different ways to support the program is found at politicsdoneright.com/support. politicsdoneright.com/support. Patreon, you can become a patron if you really want to support. Another way to support us, politicsdoneright.com/patreon. But I tell you what, I'm trying to get is more people to subscribe to our newsletter, become paid subscribers of our newsletter. To do so, please go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter, politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. And if you become a paid supporter, you can read all of my books on the Substack platform free of charge, and any subsequent book that I write, it's yours to read on the platform. So I'm trying to get as many people to become subscribers of our newsletter by going to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. And of course, you can get the book at politicsdoneright.com/books. I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willies. Oh, I see Bruce Pollard is in the house. How you doing, brother Bruce? Welcome aboard. Let me see who else that I didn't salute before I run. I think I got to Lee Grant. I think I got to E2247. Anybody that I missed, forgive me. But you know I love you. Anyway, I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.